Hey everybody, it's Party Elite with some early thoughts on the Grim and the Grave DLC for Total War Warhammer. This first video of this mini-series takes a look at the new Lords of the Vampire counts, their abilities, their campaign significance, and their possible tactical strengths and weaknesses. First off, we've got Helmand Gorst, starting the campaign with a unit of Graveguard, a Corpse Cart, and the Dire Pack under his command. He also gives all units under his command poison attacks and a plus 20% casualty replenishment rate on the map. His units' poison effects help make entire armies significantly weaker when facing Ghorst. This ability is only available in campaign, however, not in multiplayer battles. As a unit on the battlefield, Helmand Gorst should be used entirely as a support unit. Not only are his melee stats low, he's basically unarmored and will die a quick death with his extremely low HP. The Brothers Ghorst Corpse Cart reduces his speed and charge bonus, slightly increasing his armor and melee attack, though still not at a level where he should be engaging in constant melee. His HP is extremely upgraded, as are his options in terms of abilities. He causes fear, with standard undead traits as well as a 15% missile resistance. His abilities are similar to the Master Necromancer, with the addition of regeneration, which helps replenish his hit points, but makes him weaker to fire damage with an increase of 20%. Mounted on his Corpse Cart, his options for abilities are significantly increased. The Unholy Lodestone replenishes hit points of combatants within 45 meters. The Reliquary Corruption causes damage to enemy units within 45 meters, and Vigor Mortis, apart from being a great pun, gives plus 8 to melee attack and defense to Ghorst and allies within 45 meters. The most useful of these new options, it would seem to me, is the Reliquary Corruption at the cost of 42 to cause extra damage to enemy units, slowly as it might be, and Vigor Mortis at the cost of 37 points can assist the front lines in desperate situations. His spells are the standard set from the lore of vampires, though Raise Dead has been replaced by Awaken from the Grave, allowing him to spawn a unit of Grave Guards or to overcast and spawn a White Knight. This can be extremely helpful in flanking a particularly tough enemy unit without having to make all the motions. The only item Ghorst has access to is the Liber Noctis, increasing his power recharge rate and his ability recharge by 60 seconds. It also causes damage to himself, so must be used carefully. Next up, Vlad von Carstei is available as a starting option for campaigns as well as for use on the multiplayer battlefield. On the campaign map, he starts off with a unit of Fellbats, a unit of Vargeists, and most impressively, a unit of Blood Knights. That is a great unit to have at the start of the campaign, one of the best cavalry units in the game, capable of thwarting enemy cavalry because of anti-large, and giving a great mobility advantage early on. He also has the Siege Attacker attribute, meaning you don't need a siege engine to assault a city when he's leading the army. And he gives all characters a bonus 5% campaign movement range. The more interesting faction effect, in my opinion, is that he gives all the units in his army Vanguard Deployment as a trait, more or less allowing you to spring near ambushes on a regular battlefield. This effect only applies to the campaign though, and not to multiplayer battles. As a unit on the battlefield, his hit point count is amazing, and his stats are excellent for a unit that's meant to stick it out in melee combat. He does not have access to a mount, however, so he can be a little on the slow side. March him forward with your lines, using his abilities to help win crucial engagements and fend off potentially lethal attacks. Apart from the standard set of undead traits causing fear, crumbling, etc., he also has a 15% missile resistance and access to the lore of vampires. His abilities include the Curse of Undeath and the Hunger, much like Manfred and the Vampire Lord, as well as Aura of Dark Grandeur and Master of Beguilement. At the cost of 44 and 120 points respectively, they're both interesting abilities. Aura of Dark Grandeur gives -4 leadership to enemies within a 45-meter radius. This can be of tremendous use, allowing Vlad to help break a flank early and collapse enemy lines inwards. Meanwhile, Master of Beguilement must be cast on an enemy unit, giving it -46 melee attack for 36 seconds. This can reduce the melee attack of a unit down to 0, especially units that tend to build front lines. In fact, this can also make some lords largely ineffective in combat. Defensively, you can keep it in your back pocket until desperate situations arise, and offensively, you can use it to help collapse parts of the enemy line early in combat. A flank can be very easily won by using these two abilities: the melee attack debuff to make sure the enemy unit is losing, and the leadership debuff to break them just a little bit faster. With regards to his items, he has access to two: Blood Drinker, his blade that replenishes his hit points, and the Carstei ring that has a more significant effect on replenishing his hit points, but can only be used once and only if his hit points are below 20%. That means this is a last-ditch attempt at staying alive to finish off the enemy, and it might not be worth the 132 points. Blood Drinker costs 162 points, but is effective at all HP levels. In other words, in all phases of the battle. Keep in mind, however, regeneration is capped now, so don't expect to keep him alive under extreme amounts of heavy assault. Finally, we have the Strigoi Ghoul King. Not available on the campaign map as a starting lord, but he makes for a great addition to multiplayer battles. He is a spellcaster and should largely be used as such unless brought in atop a Terrorgeist mount. Be very careful about doing that, however, as air superiority is often not a contest that the vampire counts can win. The kahr will destroy Strigoi Ghoul King in the air, even with the help of magic. A General of the Empire, meanwhile, can be toppled if you hit him with an Overcast Gaze of Nagash first and have no other damage coming in, an unlikely scenario. On his mount, however, he becomes anti-large with significantly more HP, terrifying, faster, and well armored. In other words, if you don't see your opponent fielding air units, put him on a Terrorgeist. Off his Terrorgeist, he can survive in melee for short spurts, though he's largely unarmored and can't stand against large units. His poison attacks make him great for support use, both on and off his Terrorgeist. He's a standard undead lord, 15% missile resistance, causes fear, crumbling mechanics, etc., and his abilities include the Curse of the Undeath, Regeneration, Arcane Conduit, and Bloodlust, allowing him to provide a support role. Magic is where he stands out. A mix of Lore of Death and Lore of Vampires gives him spells like Spirit Leech and Gaze of Nagash to damage single units, Invocation of Nehek to keep your troops fighting, Doom and Darkness to reduce enemy leadership by a whopping 16, Soul Blight to reduce enemy armor, missile and weapon damage, and leadership, and a unique spell to Strigoi, Command of the Unliving, allowing him to raise a unit of Crypt Ghouls or a unit of Crypt Horrors if overcast. Once again, this makes him a great support-type lord. Sniping enemy lords and heroes is an option, and the use of Doom and Darkness, especially with an overcast, can help quickly collapse a flank by breaking their leadership. 3 very interesting lords have been added for the vampire counts. While Ghorst is a support unit through and through, Vlad leans almost entirely towards being directly on the front line with a van, and Strigoi is a balance between the two depending on the mount. This, of course, is an early analysis. With more gameplay, strategies and approaches will become much more concrete and ready for presentation and inclusion in my beginner's guide. What are your thoughts on these 3? Any that you're writing off completely? Any that you're particularly concerned about dealing with on the battlefield? In the next episode, we're going to look at the new lords the Empire has, and after that, we'll start looking at the brand new units for either faction.